Our next presenter also gives me great pleasure to introduce because I've worked for him. And he, to me, is probably the ultimate visionary in being able to combine sustainability and hospitality. And so he presented last year a talk about Whole World Water, which was a charity and a belief that he wanted to introduce to us. And here he is today to come and give us an update. Sonu, please welcome Sonu.
Is that better? No? Okay. Hello? 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 No? Okay. Shall I give you... I'll do this later. Good. So it's a pleasure to be here. Inspiring talk from Geraldine. And Geraldine's example is what my wife Ava and I believe very strongly in that companies can change the world, and companies do change the world. Governments don't change the world. It may be a little bit cheeky to ask this question, but would any of you, how many of you would have the current political and world leaders run your companies? I think very, very few of you. We're here, obviously, in the center of the greatest democracy in the world, but and the largest democracy in the world. But and you know that's the issue, is that governments at best they create the right climate and conditions and favorable conditions for change at best, but they very seldom do it. So it's really the company. It's the company that needs to really have a positive impact, and really it's the company really needs to go beyond the purpose of making money. The idea of corporations making money is a relatively recent phenomenon. It was the case of Ford against Dodge. I mean, the Dodge family against Henry Ford in the 1920s, that set the stage for the current modern company where shareholder profit was prioritized over everything else. But prior to that, the objective of a company was really to try and get people together to do good for society as large. And when you get that right, that can really work brilliantly. And what you do have is you have, as a result, inspired hosts, inspired employees, inspired guests, inspired stakeholders, and you actually end up being profitable. So profitability is normally the end result of a clear core purpose that goes beyond just making money. And there are ways that one can, as Geraldine talks about, introduce pricing mechanisms into one's business model that does not affect the profitability of the business and actually does not also affect the customer perception. And at Six Senses and Soneva, we actually introduced a few of these mechanisms. There are two which I'll touch upon today, which I believe have had quite a lot of impact. The first one is we actually introduced a carbon levy about 4 or 5 years ago. So we charged our guests 2% of revenues as a carbon levy on the room rate. We've had absolutely no pushback at all. This was at even Everson properties. The Everson brand would compete with your Hiltons and Meridians. So your mass market chain. When sort of the large hotel companies talk about the fact that guests would not pay and you can't force that down guest throats, we did that with the Everson brand. It wasn't optional, it was mandatory, and we had no pushback. And over a period of 5 years, we raised about $4 to $5 million as a result of our carbon charge. And that had various impacts. It funded a 1.5 megawatt windmill in South Asia, where the revenues from the electricity is subsidized, so it's half the normal national grid rate. And then the revenues that we do get do two things. One, they help the community around, and two, they put money into a feeder fund, which then produces 3 windmills over 20 years. So that was quite an interesting project that we were very proud of. We then planted 450,000 trees in Thailand, which of course is quite topical given the last few years we've had terrible floods in Thailand that have affected our industry. So that was another interesting project. And we planted 90 different species, 300 acres of degraded forests, and sequestered 255,000 tons of CO2. There again, some more examples of that. That's our group conscience, planting a tree. And then another one which we're very proud of are cooking stoves. The Slow Life Foundation has actually achieved the first gold standard certified project in Myanmar. Gold standard, when I mean, is where you can sell your carbon credits. We've done this in Darfur before. Our commitment is 120,000 cooking stoves in Darfur, and our initial commitment for Myanmar is 40,000 cooking stoves. The potential in Myanmar is up to 30 million stoves, and it is our goal for the Slow Life Foundation to give as much of that as possible. It's a fantastic mechanism because the cooking stove both helps the local communities in that firewood and fuel, especially in Myanmar, is highly expensive as an energy source. So it makes burning that firewood something like 3 times more efficient. So you're sequestering CO2 because you're reducing the firewood burning. You're helping the income of the families because they're spending a third what they'd normally spend on firewood. And in some cases, especially in Myanmar, they're spending up to 30 to 50% of their income on this fuel. So you're suddenly giving them a lot of spare disposable income. In the case of Darfur, the challenge is much more in that there's a risk of rape, attack, etc. Women going out to get firewood. So that helps. We then sell the carbon credits. It gives us, we don't sell all of them because we need some to offset our own carbon emissions, but it gives us enough from selling some of the credits to return the money to the Slow Life Foundation, which is a UK charity, and get a 6% yield. And then that will allow us to then do the next project. So that's why our goal is really to get to 30 million stoves in Myanmar, because it's a circuitous system in that we're getting our capital returned to be able to reinvest it again. So the possibilities really are infinite. And there is your cooking stove. Makes burning firewood much, much more efficient. It's a simple $20, $25 piece of equipment. We sell it at $6. So it costs us $25. We sell it at $6 because we feel that the local community need to have some attribute, some value to it. But of course, the return on investment for any family that buys it is a couple of weeks. So these are our targets, as I touched upon earlier. And so that was one example of where you can introduce a pricing mechanism, the 2% carbon charge. It's mandatory, as I said earlier, not optional. And it works, absolutely no pushback at all, even at your more mass market commercial chain. The other one, of course, was the whole water campaign, which I touched upon last year. And I won't elaborate too much on the campaign because I see a lot of you were here last year, and so I don't want to repeat what I said last time. But in essence, this was another example where one has to be the change that one wants to see in others. And the big issue, of course, in the pristine environments that we live is rubbish, garbage, degradation of these beautiful environments. And Kostas touched yesterday about people not saying, oh, what a wonderful place. I loved all that plastic on the beach. I'm going to return. We found a lot of plastic rolling up on our beaches in the Maldives. So what we did is we actually banned branded water. So no imported bottled water, saved of the obvious savings of the food miles, the waste, etc. But I also believe that it sort of improves the logistics and it saves money. So our cost of sales for getting water went from 20% down to about 2 or 3%. So we saved about 18% of revenues by bottling on site. Logistically, it was better. You can imagine remote locations trying to get branded water into your hotels can be a logistical nightmare, with lots of people filling up paper and being involved in trying to get this product to your island. So we also believe we deliver a better product because these bottles last 1,000 times, not once. With the Whole World Water campaign, we're about to finalize a really slick, elegant bottle. Hoteliers sometimes focus very much on what the guest sees, and so a beautiful bottle is something that will attract this campaign to sort of roll out into the industry. And so it is a slicker product, and I also believe that it's healthier. You have an example of our water menu at Soneva, where we have 7 jugs. Each jug has a crystal rod. Each rod has various healing properties. And, you know, going beyond that, there's Masaru Emoto, who I'm sure a lot of you know about, the Japanese philosopher, who took photos and filmed water molecules under a microscope. He made statements like, "I will kill you," and that was the shape of the molecule. Positive statements, you know, offered a prayer, and they start to look like, you know, the catalogue of a Cartier sort of jewelry collection. And we actually play classical music in our water bottling plants and as a thing. We also alkalize the water, so the water's pH goes from 7 up to 8.2, 8.3, and then, as I said, we have these jugs, which makes it a healthier product. So what we've achieved with Six Senses and Soneva over the last few years is 600,000 people being given access to fresh water. And I've run out of time, so I'll just quickly flick on projects. This is one in Gambia. $1,500 spent, 5,600 people benefited. Thirst aid, ceramic filters, $10,000 spent, 9,500 people benefited. So quite efficient projects. What we have worked on now is a campaign to get the whole industry on board. If the top 10 hotel groups join this campaign, and they give 10% of their water revenue. So they'll still be financially better off because cost of sales has dropped from 20 down to 2%. So if they give 10% of that back, so their cost of sales in effect is 12% rather than 20, they're financially better off, logistically better off, you know, better, healthier, safer product. You know, plastic we all know is a carcinogen, et cetera, et cetera. I know I'm preaching to the converted. We can give the whole world, we can raise about $1 billion for water infrastructure. And that could really solve Millennium Goal 7, which is to give every human being access to fresh water. So this is really the campaign. It's starting to snowball. 1 billion people access to fresh water. That's really the goal. And the Whole World Water campaign, it's a 2-pronged social enterprise, which I touched upon. As you can see, a much slicker bottle. That's the bottle we're working on. Sorry, I'm speaking really fast now, just trying to finish. These are the properties that have joined. Susie wanted an update. So as you can see, still small, starting, still smallish groups. Virgin, of course, Richard Branson's been very much behind it. Auberge, as you know, they're testing on one project. The good news is that 3 Ritz-Carltons have started, and if that pilot works well, they'll roll it throughout the chain. And once Ritz-Carlton's done, of course, you know, Four Seasons, St. Regis, and others will have to follow suit. They'll have no choice. Fairmont Hotels have just ordered the bottling unit, the filtration unit for 45 of their hotels. That'll be installed shortly, and they've assured us that after that they will actually join the campaign, and then the following year further. So a little bit of, you know, as you can see, the snowball is starting to move. The launch was March, and it's starting to work well. And that's it. Thank you.